12 days traveling cross country as a hashtag solo traveler. Now, if you have been following me on my other social media accounts, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, etc., you've probably seen this in shorts, one day at a time. So now this is going to be the story from day 1 through 12. And the reason for this is if you've read my best-selling book, Abundance Beyond Trauma, you know that I have been working on reparenting my inner children, little J. And I refer to little J no matter what age she is. And so this road trip was to give her basically the road trip of her life, where she had that safe and secure reparenting with safe mom and dad. That's me. And I also wanted to share what it was like to do a solo adventure, because I had never done that before, where I traveled from California all the way to Kansas City, Missouri on my own, pulling Elizabeth trailer. And the reason why I thought this was a great idea to start doing is, yes, it's one thing to survive trauma, but I'm all about changing the narrative, about finding joy behind those experiences. Because there's a lot of talk about how to survive your trauma, but there's not a lot of talk about how do you reclaim your joy after you've had those experiences. And since I work in the mental health field and I'm somebody who has experienced a tremendous amount of trauma, I thought I would show you through real life experiences what some of the things are that I go through on a regular basis, as well as reduce this idea that people in the mental health field have it all together, right? Because we are also bringing our experience. Experience is the highest form of knowledge. And many of my clients, I will never refer to them as patients, because you are the healer. So my job is to awaken the healer within. So I'm either going to call you a client or I'm going to call you the healer. More often than not, I'm going to call you the healer. And it is important that you know that I am bringing you all of the experience that I have learned through my journey to help you on your journey, along with my, education and professional experience as well. So I hope you enjoy the story. So the day had finally arrived. Elizabeth trailer was ready to go. For the next 12 days, it was me on the open road. I was so excited, I could hardly contain myself. Each day was planned as far as hours of drive time and where to set up Elizabeth trailer. I had all of my supplies needed and personal protection, including 3 people tracking my location. Once set up, I would go and explore the area I was visiting. Some days I was in for 1 night, others for 2, with the final destination of 4 days. What was the purpose of this venture, you might ask? To know if I could do it, and to give Lil J et al. All my inner aspects, a safe road trip with safe boundaries. And that's me. I'm safe mom and dad, and I'm more. There was business stuff in there as well, working on a new project launching in the fall. On day 1, I made it to Yerington, Nevada, to a small RV campground called Whispering River. Now, I had thought it would take 4 hours to arrive, but it took longer. As pulling a trailer, you can only drive 55 miles per hour. Now, this was the first major readjustment to my plans, as I had intended on only driving 4 hours each day, but had not calculated the extra drive time with the slower miles per hour. The heat was high and dry in Yerington. I set up Elizabeth trailer, unhitched her from my 4Runner, lowered the 4 jack stands, pulled out the slide out, turned on the fridge, gas, hooked up the electrical, water, and sewer. And by then I was starving and frankly too tired to cook, as the added drive time and the heat factor had already hit me. Now, luckily this campground had a small restaurant, which was perfect for the occasion. My intention for this site was to get into this river, so I spoke to the lady behind the counter. at the restaurant, and she had enjoyed the river with her family the day before. It's always good to ask about the quality of the water wherever you go, as sometimes there might be bacterial warnings that you need to be aware of. By the time I finished eating, it was close to 5 p.m. I needed to fill my car with gas to prepare for the morning travel, and that's much easier to do when Elizabeth trailer is not attached. I had a few groceries to purchase, so I wasn't eating out along this journey, even during the tired moments. Well, now it was 6 p.m. It was looking less and less likely that I would be getting into the river. Little Jay was certainly disappointed. I reassured her that there were many water sources along the way and promised we would certainly be getting into the water at some point. I had to adjust when I would leave in the morning with the new drive times as well, and did not consider how tired I would feel after so much driving. At this point, I don't think it hit me that the trailer setup takes a lot of work as well. I looked at the route for the next day and made sure everything was set. I scoped out where I could do my morning yoga before hitting the road, and luckily the campground had a workout room. So by 7:30, I grabbed my book and read inside with the AC on. I woke refreshed and went to do my yoga. I found the community board and placed my brochure and business cards and had a conversation about Ayurveda and the mind with a fellow camper in the laundry room before unhooking the electrical, emptying the sewer and water from Elizabeth trailer, closing the slide out, turning off the gas, lifting the jack stands, and hooking her back up to my Forerunner. I was now heading to Elko, Nevada. As I headed out on day 2, there were many warnings from Google Maps of lane closures ahead, so I prepared myself for delays. That way, I would be pleasantly surprised if I made it earlier than planned. The hues of brown and orange on the hills as I passed by were beautiful. I turned on my Tom Petty playlist and sang my heart out on the open road. An aspect of me was searching for my old friend Fear. You see, I'd been living with Fear for so long that we had become old friends. Not by choice, but by necessity. So when my old buddy had been gone for a long stretch of time, I noticed their absence. I decided to talk to this part of me. You know, it is possible to live without fear, even though you have been accustomed to having them by your side for so long. Yeah, it's just an unusual feeling, as if there's an empty space that needs to be filled. Joy, I yelled. We're filling this space with joy. You see, fear was taking so much space that there wasn't much room for joy, and now there was. I burst into happy tears as I continued to sing Wildflowers by Tom Petty. More aspects were coming into alignment with joy. As the next lane closure approached, I laughed at the scene ahead. There were large, round, orange cones that had been knocked over into the only open lane, and here I was pulling Elizabeth trailer with a slew of vehicles behind me. Well, let's see how well we can get through this obstacle course without running over a cone. Now, I turned it into a game instead of a fear-based worry, even though realistically, much could go wrong with what lied ahead. You see, the mind is a powerful tool if you train it properly and know how to use it. I slowed down, allowing the cars behind me to at least slow down as they could not yet see what was ahead. As I weaved in and out of this obstacle course, I managed to make it through without running over any of the already fallen cones in the middle of the lane. Woohoo! I shouted as the lane opened up to 2 and continued along the way. Since it was unclear when the next gas station would come, I made sure to fill up at the half-tank mark. Elizabeth trailer, she gets a lot of attention wherever we go. Boy, she sure is cute. Or gosh, I just love her retro look. Those are some of the most common remarks. As I pulled into the Iron Horse RV campground, it was 94 degrees, and I was hoping to get into the pool to cool off. I got Elizabeth all hooked up, my tumbling mat set up so I could dance, stretch, and move once it cooled off. I went to explore the pool, and when I arrived, the size of the pool was so small, I mistook it for a hot tub, and the hot tub was even smaller. I laughed, snapped a photo, sent it to my daughter and my boyfriend, which they found equally comical. Unfortunately, by the time I was ready to get into said tiny pool, a family had taken it over, and well, there just wasn't enough room for all of us. So I walked back to my campsite, and I now had neighbors on each side. Now I've become accustomed to noticing being noticed as the solo female traveler, and I often get asked questions about it. The couple to my left had a beautiful Doberman pinscher, and I considered for the 100+ time whether getting a dog as a travel companion / protector for my solo travels was a good idea, not just for me, but also for the dog. The wife started up a conversation and asked me if I was traveling with a dog, and I said no. She suggested that I get a Doberman to keep the creepers away, and her husband confirmed. I appreciated the protective gesture and mentioned that I wasn't sure if it was fair for the dog with my current nomadic roaming lifestyle. I reassured them that I did have quite an arsenal of protection with me, should I need it, and the sense of relief was noticeable. As the sun went down, I ate fruit for dinner, as that is what my body was craving on this hot evening, and I honored that. Once my food had digested, I proceeded with a process I created over the years and now call vulnerable vibrations, where I allow my body to move intuitively and intrinsically. I sing, I hum, I make sounds in the same manner, and I allow any emotions, fresh or old, to rise to the surface and express. Throughout the years, this is how I would process past experiences and integrate aspects that had been disconnected through the senses. I often would combine this with my EDHIR adhere process, and the end result is phenomenal. I feel as if I've reset my system to its natural state, and now being is happening. I slept soundly that night and knew there would be an early start to avoid the intense desert heat. I woke refreshed, went for a brisk walk to prepare my body for the drive ahead to Colville, Utah for a 2-night stay. This time, when I broke down Elizabeth, I filled the fresh water tank with water on the off chance that should something happen and I run into a snag along the way, I would have the water necessary for an overnight stay. This seemed wise, traveling through unknown territory through Nevada. This next stop has a body of water, and little Jay was giddy to get in and explore. On day 3, I was grateful to get out of Nevada. It all started looking the same, and it seemed that the stops for gas were few and far between. Once I crossed into Utah, I saw the salt flats and knew water was nearby. As the scenery shifted, the degree of heat was the same, yet the way the heat felt was different. There was more moisture in the air. Even though Utah is still considered desert, it has more water sources, which helps cool things off a bit, or so that was my experience. The drive didn't seem too long. I spoke to my daughter and grandkids along the way, which helped break up the time. I could feel little Jay's excitement growing as more water sources appeared. Yes, sweet child, we will play in the water today. I arrived at Holiday Hills RV Park, got all set up at a gorgeous spot along the creek that fed into a nearby river. Upon check-in, I asked the clerk about paddleboarding in the river, and he said that should be fine. The water wasn't too strong, and it was a clean water source. With eagerness, I set Elizabeth up, put on my water shoes to go explore this river and make my own assessment. It seemed safe as far as I could tell, So I headed back and began pulling out my inflatable paddleboard. A neighbor commented on Elizabeth Traylor's unique retro look and started up a conversation of his nomadic travels. As I pumped up the paddleboard, I asked him his thoughts on the river and paddleboarding, and like the clerk, agreed it seemed safe. Now at this point, I did not realize that with the days of buildup for Lil J getting into the water, the conversation with the neighbor, that I was about to forget a very important piece of safety when going into a river: a life jacket. I was clearly distracted, but didn't know it yet, and I was soon to find out. I headed into the river, got on my knees on the board, and heading down, it was beautiful and flowing nicely. I passed two fishermen who said hello, and then I saw it. The current was picking up. And in that moment, the light bulb came on. I looked down and I realized I'm without my life jacket. And I'm a really good swimmer. However, the elements are nothing to mess with. In that moment, time slowed down. I could see what was about to happen. And interestingly, I was not afraid though. I was headed right for a large bundle of branches that looked dry and sharp, and the current was too strong to paddle away from it. I was headed face first into it. So I turned my head and I grabbed a few branches in hopes to steer myself away, and I was pulled off the board. Now I had the ankle strap on and quickly realized this was creating more harm than good. So I reached under and pulled it off while holding the board under one arm, the paddle in the same hand, and gripping the branches. The current was just too strong to swim across to the other side to get to shore. And the spot I was in, I could not touch the bottom. I needed help. So I called out to the fisherman that I had passed. I need help. The closest one arrived, named Jordan. And I said, if I swing the paddle, you might be able to catch it and pull me across. He agreed. And I swung the paddle and he pulled me across. He asked his friend if the water was smoother upriver, and he said it's about the same. He offered to carry my board back to the campsite, and I declined. Thank you for fishing me out and rescuing me today, Jordan. We both chuckled. My heart was racing from this adventure, and I wiped my brow and noticed blood, and that my hat and sunglasses were gone. Now, I must have lost them in the river. I had my phone in a waterproof case around my neck, so I pulled it out to see where the blood was coming from. I had a cut right on my third eye. All right, adventure scratches. I have a first aid kit, so nothing too bad. I thought I would rinse off in the shower and then see if there were any other scratches. My legs had quite a few, even though I did not have any feeling of that happening. Certainly from the adrenaline. I noticed all 7 of my earrings were gone. Yet it seemed like my piercings were intact. Still more blood, but from where? A large cut from those sharp branches had got the back of my right ear when I had turned my head to avoid heading face first into those branches. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, and it was clearly dripping blood. I got out my first aid kit of turmeric to stop the bleeding. This is an Ayurvedic remedy. And Murivena oil for the scrapes and bruises, also an Ayurvedic remedy. This is my Ayurvedic first aid kit. Now, since my commitment to little J is safe boundaries and safe reparenting, I took responsibility for the distraction of missing the life jacket, and that we will be sticking to calmer waters like a lake. I took it easy for the rest of the evening. I warmed up some soup as the river water was quite cold, and I had a chill. I put Rasnadi powder on the top of my head to prevent getting cold. Yet another Ayurvedic remedy. I sat by the creek and read my book until the mosquitoes came, and then ventured inside, where I slept like a baby. Upon waking on day 4, I was exhausted from the adrenaline rush of the river. I went for a gentle morning walk along the creek, visited the horses next door, and took some pictures of the flowers in the meadow. Today was going to be a chill day, as what I experienced the day before, even though I did not feel fear, it had an impact on my nervous system, so a slower pace was needed. I made a breakfast bowl and ate out by the creek, and then continued reading. After a few hours, I noticed I needed a nap, so I listened to the call, something I had learned how to do over the years, to listen to the parts of me that are saying, I'm tired and I need rest. The nap was great. I continued to contemplate the lack of fear during the river incident, wondering whether that was a good thing or not. This could be considered a life-threatening event, according to some. My mind did not think so, yet my nervous system said otherwise. Little J wanted more water adventures, of course. My nervous system wanted rest, so I explained that with the cuts on my ear, third eye, and legs, we would need those to close up before entering another water source, but that we could enjoy the wonderful fantasy world of fiction today and dive into our book. I made some pistachio pudding to enjoy as the hours went by. A second nap came while reading by the creek, as the sound of water was very soothing and relaxing. Upon waking, I made some soup and then prepared what I could for an easy morning transition to head out to Rawlins, Wyoming. Bedtime came early, even though I had 2 naps that day. Resting was a great way to reset my nervous system from the previous day's river adventures and build up energy for tomorrow's drive. I also did some alternate nostril breathing to make sure that the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system was in balance. I headed out early on day 5. The drive was gorgeous, as the hills of Utah did not disappoint, with the beautiful earth tones of gold and brown and orange leading me towards my destination of Rawlins, Wyoming. I made a stop in Evanston to grab some groceries per the recommendation of a fellow nomad. Arriving at Western Hills Campground, there were only 4 campers. The clouds in the distance were very dark, implying rain in the middle of summer. Strange, I thought. This campground was nothing but a gravel field with RV hookups. The song that was playing in the back of my mind was Wide Open Spaces by the Dixie Chicks. There was a laundry room with a TV and a few slot machines. And a small welcome center where you could buy a cold drink and a souvenir. I hooked up the trailer and set up my Starlink to prepare for a business video call when the wind started to pick up. The scene was something out of The Wizard of Oz. Dark clouds, high winds, and some scattered rain. Now, as I began my business meeting, the trailer began rocking from the 25-mile-per-hour windstorm. I was in awe of the elements in Wyoming in the middle of summer. Then I wondered if I was in tornado territory, and if so, what would I do if I were in such an event? This was more of a curious thought from my higher mind and a bit of a fear-based thought from Lil J. I knew it wouldn't be staying in the trailer, so I went to check out the laundry room, since I had a load to wash anyway, and explore the rest of the campground. Yes, in the windstorm. I certainly felt like Dorothy at this point. The laundry room, which stayed open 24 hours, seemed to be the only solid structured place on the campground, should one need to seek shelter from a tornado, as I certainly did not see a basement, and there were bathrooms in the building that did not have windows. Okay, I had a plan, but it seemed unlikely I would need to use it, but I appreciated the research. I was able to put little Jay's fear at ease. I finished working on my computer at the laundry room as my laundry finished, and then I made my way, hair and dust blowing in my face, back to Elizabeth trailer. I made some chicken noodle soup, which went perfectly with the weather, and since enjoying the outdoors was off the table, I set up Netflix and watched a movie. I wondered how well I would sleep with the rocking of the trailer from the wind, but clearly it did not disturb me as I woke up early, ready to head out to the next state. Leaving Wyoming on day 6, I was grateful the winds had died down. There were some scattered showers as I made my way to Kimball, Nebraska, yet another gravel field of RV hookups, next to a water tower. Now, since I was not able to get in any exercise the day before, I made sure to get some laps in around this campground, even though it was raining off and on. This California girl was clearly spoiled by the Cali summers, as walking in June in Kimball with a jacket on was not at all what I expected. This spot was another one-nighter, so not much to explore. However, enough time to chillax and read. I sat for a bit in contemplation about life up to this point. And wow, what a journey it's been. To even have such an opportunity to explore different lifestyles, like being a nomad and taking such an adventure of unfolding joy with my sweet inner child, inner teen, inner young adult, et al., it brought tears of gratitude. My life has been anything but normal or traditional, and while I won't go into the details in this video, you could read more about it in my best-selling book, Abundance Beyond Trauma. The emotions flowed, and when they finished, as they always do, I returned to my book for the evening. Unfortunately, my evening was disrupted by the couple across the way arguing and pulling their children into the chaos. I reflected further on my past relationships as I recall being in a similar scenario and again finding gratitude for the growth I have also experienced in that regard. And while these 12 days were a solo mission, the 12 to follow were going to be with my duo in a healthy relationship dynamic. I went to sleep that evening, grateful for the reflection and joyful for life. The drive to Kearney, Nebraska on day 7 was smooth, and Lil J was ecstatic as this site was in front of a lake. And by now the cuts and scrapes from the river adventure had closed up, so paddleboarding was definitely going to happen. Pulling up to the campground, it was quite small, which I appreciated. My site was a pull-through site, which, if you know, you know. There's a reason why there's a bumper sticker that says, "I'm sorry for what I said when backing up the trailer." A back-in site has always given me many opportunities to perfect such a skill. This site had a concrete slab with a picnic table and room for my tumbling mat, so I was already planning out my next 2 days to include my vulnerable vibrations practice. So, what is vulnerable vibrations? Well, it's a method of movement, somatic body work, emotional processing, mental calibration, with alignment of spirit wrapped into each session. Now, I created this method over the last 22 years of practice. Vulnerable vibrations, it brings you back to that childlike essence and innocence before you were told what to think, what to believe, and how to behave. Before the impressions that were left from adverse life experiences and traumas. Vulnerable vibrations allows you to come back to yourself and just be. You can expect to create and reclaim safety within body, mind, and heart, and spirit, finding strength and vulnerability and an alignment in your energetic vibration that is aligned with who you genuinely are. Vulnerable vibrations can be experienced online, in person, and in group settings. Now, since I'd not done my practice the last few evenings, I was surely grateful. 1, that there was an area to set up, and 2, I could open up the awning of Elizabeth to cover myself from the rain that was forecasted as well. After setup, I put on my swimsuit, pumped up my paddleboard, put on my life jacket, and headed to the lake, where I spent the next hour and a half enjoying the serenity of the lake. which I had all to myself. This was a nice break before returning to a work video call with my podcast co-host, a naturopathic doctor who also specializes in trauma and adverse life experiences, to plan our next episode. Now, once that was complete, I had such an appetite and was craving Indian food. I was curious if there were Indian restaurants in the area and was happy to find an Indian Nepalese restaurant that had great reviews. The food was excellent, and the portions were such that it would feed me for at least 3 meals. So I returned to the campground and I went for a long walk and then sat by the lake, enjoying the rhythm of the water and the peace and quiet of nature. A while later, I began my vulnerable vibrations practice. During this beautiful session, I was able to release some tension built up in my hips from driving, some childlike emotions. They rose to the surface as I curled up into a ball, hugging myself. It had been 7 days since I had a hug, and my love language is touch. And since I was traveling solo, I needed to give this to this part of myself. As that moment passed, I began to dance and move with the elements in nature, breathing and allowing sounds to erupt naturally until I felt aligned and safe within. And there was a feeling of innocence. By now the moon was out, and I laid out on the mat, moonbathing for some time before heading in for the night. I woke early on day 8 and decided to go out to breakfast as Little J was craving pancakes. I had no desire to cook, and so I was all too willing to oblige. I discovered a delicious restaurant called Good Evans, where they served the best sweet potato pancake with candied pecans on top. Now, this pancake reminded me of the delicious sweet potato pie I had for Easter from my duo's mom, giving this experience all the feels. I wrote in my journal while enjoying a London fog, which is a mix of English breakfast tea, some milk, and vanilla syrup. Heading back to the campsite, I had some videos to record for the Abundance Beyond Trauma self-paced course. So I decided to record those videos and then head out to the lake again. There's something about water that quiets the mind, slows the breath, and balances the nervous system. I floated and paddled on the paddleboard for hours in deep gratitude, not only for the last 24 hours, but this cross-country trip and the confidence it was building. The close relationship between my higher self and all aspects of Lil J, and the wisdom that life continues to impart. The forecasted rain finally arrived around lunchtime, so I enjoyed the leftovers from the Indian Nepalese place from the day before, and then called my daughter on FaceTime, enjoying her and 3 of my 5 grandkids. There's something quite special about watching your child grow up and have a family of their own, observing their way and appreciating our differences. I often learned something from her in every call. That evening, I enjoyed another deep dive of vulnerable vibrations. This one focused on letting go of the guilt of being a teen mom, as I know that was not easy for either of us. A child with severe trauma, raising children essentially alone, doing her best and trying to survive, letting go of not being the mom they needed, and accepting I was the mom I was able to be. The only knowledge of mother I had was not good, and so doing the opposite was my only blueprint. And yet I was also the provider, so I wasn't around much. Letting go of the shoulds, because shoulding all over oneself just stinks. And coming to a place of acceptance and gratitude for myself and my mom. I wouldn't be who or where I am today had she not given birth to me, and had I not had the experiences that I had with her. She taught me what not to do. Her life, a perfect example of what could happen if one doesn't do the inner work. Not many get that particular gift. Thank you, Mom. I see everyone as a teacher in some way, from the mentally afflicted to the youngest grandkid. We can always learn something. On day 9, the morning was gloomy as I closed up Elizabeth trailer and I headed out to the next destination, Smithville, Missouri. Yet another state I had never been to. Driving into Missouri, I loved the size of the land. Each home sat as far back on a large lot of beautiful green grass, so large that it seemed to be a workout just to get to your mailbox. The weather had shifted to a more humid heat, which is actually my favorite type of heat if I had to choose. This was going to be my longest stay of 4 days at Crow's Creek Campground, and yes, by a lake. If you haven't figured out by now, a body of water and a forest of trees is really all it takes for me to be happy. Arriving there was a line of campers waiting to check in to this county park. As I pulled up to my site, I had to troubleshoot how to back into it. I really don't like backing up this trailer. You turn the steering wheel one way, and the trailer goes the opposite direction, and then you need to line it up so the electrical, water, and sewer connections will reach. I made at least 10 attempts before the neighbor came by and said, "I'm not trying to be unneighborly by not helping you, but this is how you learn." Now, to help you understand my mental state at this point, I was tired from driving. I was dripping sweat from the heat as it was 95 degrees and humid, and I was very frustrated. Now, I agreed with the neighbor because I understood logically, while saying something completely different in my head because I was emotional. Why on earth would you choose this moment? I am most frustrated and still haven't backed up this goddamn trailer to tell me this, is what I said in my head. Now, I honestly wanted to cry out of frustration, and I did, as I often do. There's no sense in creating disease by holding it in. This is one of the many bits of wisdom I have learned from Ayurveda. So I had my moment, which felt childlike. And so I spoke to little Jay and I reminded her that even the most experienced at trailers talk about the difficulties of backing up a trailer and how proud of her I was for doing it and not giving up. The moment passed, like it always does, and I continued with my efforts. It took 7 more attempts before I successfully backed Elizabeth's trailer up. Now I had to set her up. I'm going to sleep so good tonight out of exhaustion, I thought. Now, the coolest part about this site was the view. It had a very large tree with a field of grass behind the trailer where I set up the propane fire pit, camping chair, and tumbling mat. I had some fresh fruit for lunch, as that's what my body was craving, and then I sat outside under the tree to rest for some time. In the later afternoon, I explored the campground and the lake. I would need to drive a little and park in order to get my paddleboard out there, and decided that I may do that another day. Today, I just did not have the energy. There wasn't much hunger for dinner, so I chose to skip that meal and do my vulnerable vibrations practice, as there was much to decompress and release from that day. As I began to move, I just dropped to the floor of the mat. I curled up in the fetal position, and I held myself in a comforting embrace, and I cried as I really needed a hug. There was this feeling of loneliness. And while I knew my duo would be here in 3 days, in this moment, what I really wanted was a hug from him. So once the crying had passed, I used my self-treatment ball to work out the tension in my hips, and then I began dancing and singing with the elements until I felt aligned. I shared my experience with my duo in our nightly conversation, and I fell asleep into a deep slumber. On day 10, I woke that morning quite tired and decided to take the day slow, nourishing, and relaxing. This solo trip with the physical, mental, and emotional strains and new challenges were catching up with me. I made myself an omelet with some carrot juice, and I headed outside to relax and enjoy the nature with my book. A while later, I went for a walk and upon my return, I laid down on the tumbling mat for an afternoon nap out in nature. I woke starving and made myself a large turkey and avocado sandwich with sun chips inside, something I had done since I was a little kid. Little Jit was enjoying herself in this moment. Then I heard thunder, and quickly a rain shower started in 95-degree weather. Now, the only time I had experienced this was in India, but again, I had to laugh at the fact that this was happening in the middle of summer. My California mind still struggling to accept the fact that different parts of the US, the weather is variable in the summer. The downpour was strong, so I closed the awning to prevent any damage, grabbed the tumbling mat and camping chair, quickly shoved it under the trailer before heading inside. I enjoyed Netflix, thanks to having a Starlink, until the rain stopped. Well, by now the sun had gone down and the ground was wet. I made some corn chowder with some crackers, signed off on some edited modules for the Abundance Beyond Trauma self-paced online course, and tried to do some stretching inside. This is the moment I realized I needed a larger trailer. One where I could do yoga inside if it's raining outside, a full bathroom instead of a wet bath, and an oven, not just a stovetop, as I love to bake. On day 11, I had an abundance of energy and was ready to head out to the lake. Now, this lake was much larger. There were boats and jet skis, canoes. Fishermen and kids were playing at the shore. So the water was not as calm as I would have preferred, even though I arrived around 8 a.m. But I was certainly not going to let that stop me from having my adventure. I paddled out to the calmest area, and I floated for some time as the Missouri sun kissed my skin. A lady pulled up in a canoe and mentioned my blissful state, as we began a lovely conversation about the relaxing nature of the elements, specifically water and earth, before she headed out to meet her family, who were enjoying jet skis further out on the lake. As more boats and motorized water sports equipment arrived, I decided to head back to eat. I enjoyed a BLT and sat outside listening to the birds and dozed off in my chair. I woke a while later, realizing that there was a time when being alone felt like abandonment and not solitude like it feels now. This is what subconsciously had driven me into many unhealthy relationship dynamics. Well, one of the many things. You see, there is a difference in being alone and being lonely. And my father being abruptly removed out of my life at the very young age of 6 years old, which was for my protection. This created an abandonment wound that in the past, when I was alone, created a trigger response where I felt a part of me was gone. Now with the healing work, and this is how the EDHIR, adhere process came to be, I now understood that a part of me really had disconnected from a part of myself at the moment of that event, as it was more than I could handle or comprehend. And I carried that into my adult years. But let me tell you, it is a real game changer when you discover that part again, heal it, and integrate with it. Because here I was alone in the middle of Missouri, enjoying the solitude and feeling whole and complete. I felt like dancing. So I turned on some music and I danced out in nature in the field of grass, honoring Mother Earth and Father Sky. On day 12, I slept in till 9, so I clearly needed the rest. Today was the day my duo was flying in the afternoon. And would conclude the solo portion of my travels. Now, the next 12 days would be in partnership. I was most excited to get a hug. As you may recall, that by day 7, this was what I had missed the most on my solo voyage. I prepared some fresh fruits for breakfast and did my yoga practice outside before enjoying them. I deflated the paddleboard and packed it up as we would be leaving the site in the morning. I made some chai and went for a walk by the lake. And by now it was 92 degrees with high humidity. When I returned, I showered and prepared for the drive to the airport. My partner's from Kansas City, Missouri, so the dinner plan would be authentic Kansas City barbecue. When I arrived, we were both excited to see each other after 12 days. That hug was incredible. We didn't care that airport security may want us to move the car. We drove to Jack Stack Barbecue, where I enjoyed the best beef ribs and loaded baked potato. Afterwards, we drove through downtown and discussed tomorrow's plans of visiting the Negro Baseball League Museum, meeting his college buddy he played pro ball with, and seeing the Kansas City Royals versus New York Yankees game, all of which would be new adventures for me. Returning to the campsite, I enjoyed showing him around so he could now see what I had been experiencing: the lake, the nature, and the beautiful sunset views, which we enjoyed together. So now stay tuned for days 12 through 24 of hashtag Duo Travelers. And I look forward to sharing that with you soon.